Have you heard this song before?
What if aliens are real and they live 1 trillion years?
That song is called A TV Show Called Earth, written by Philip Labes, and it was released in 2021 to TikTok fame and success. It talks about the possibility that Earth and everything that happens on it, be it politics, relationships, artwork, sports, tragedy, exploration, and even wars, are simply entertainment for an omnipotent alien species. That they've watched each and every one of our lives play out since the dawn of humanity just as a brief distraction from their near-endless lives. Philip plays a narrator in this song, which explains how the show may be nearing the end of its multi-million season run, giving the likes of Grey's Anatomy a run for its money. The reasoning behind this is the writers being too cruel to the characters, forcing things like war and poverty to occur instead of the actually good stuff like humans falling in love and having a happy life. He says that for whatever reason the show may end, due to an apocalypse or just bad writing, that the aliens may not want to watch us again simply due to how awful most of our actions were. It's impossible to have a favorite character, as our human lives are so short in comparison to the aliens' trillion-year lifespan. The song ends with the sounds of wind blowing while the voice of the overlooking alien reverberates over the dead world saying, "Well, that was fun." It's a really creative concept, and when paired with Philip's guitar skills, it really wasn't a surprise when it blew up. For a while, this song was everywhere, being duetted or just being reacted to, and it did super well, boasting an impressive 3 million plays on Spotify. This song is easily Philip's most popular work. However, this song isn't the only thing he's put out. While most people only know him for it, A TV Show Called Earth is just the tip of the iceberg when it comes to Philip Labes. Since 2012, Philip has been an aspiring actor located in LA, mainly appearing as minor characters in television shows such as The Mindy Project and I Ship It. He's also landed a few bigger jobs in shows like Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D., Lucifer, and even Watchmen.
I will say the acting by this guy was incredible.
And also appears in some short films such as The Flock of Four, where he plays one of the 4 main characters in question. He's also active in the Upright Citizens Brigade, a comedy club in LA where he acts in the show The Musical Version, where every night, 4 comedians improvise a musical version of a movie such as Dune, Inception, and even Space Jam. It's been ongoing since 2019, and Phillips is featured in every episode on YouTube and Apple Podcasts. Speaking of podcasts, Phillips also in the podcast The Quickness, a comedy podcast he hosts with fellow comedian Jack Jordan. In terms of music though, he has releases as early as 2013 with his single Yosemite, but he didn't release his first album until 2018 when he dropped The Boy Who Couldn't Grow Up. It's a pretty good album which resembles what his summer album ended up sounding like, as well as a bit of AJR. My favorite song is Jealous Of, but this video is not about that album. After taking a brief hiatus from the internet after the release of this album to work on acting stuff, Philip would release the song to change his life in 2021, A TV Show Called Earth, but we already talked about that. Point is, he got millions of views on TikTok and kinda blew up, but after this, the popularity started to dim. He would do live streams over the course of 2021 where he'd perform his original songs to audiences of 12 people or so. One day though, Grammy-nominated Jason Mraz, the I'm Yours guy, saw one of his streams. And he liked his work so much that he offered an opener position to Philip on his tour. This spread the word about Philip's work across the country and allowed him to start working on a huge undertaking. He was going to release 4 albums in 1 year, one for each of the 4 seasons. This was an amazing original idea. No one had ever done it before. Okay, yeah, but that was the inspiration. No other artist had done it.
My arch nemesis, Weezer.
Okay, sure, Weezer announced that in early 2021 though, so it's completely possible Philip had no idea that was happening and came up with it completely on his own. No Vine boom, that means it has to be true. Anyway, I have no idea how long this video is going to end up being, but I really like these 4 albums, and this half self-indulgent analysis, half spreading the word project is all about them. As a brief note, if you haven't listened to any of these albums yet, I highly recommend you do so before watching this video. Both because I will spoil the meanings of every song in the project, and because Philip deserves way more attention than he has right now. As a side note to this side note, a majority of the interpretations of these songs are nothing more than that, my personal interpretation. Philip, if for whatever reason you're watching this and I completely whiff the meaning of every single one of these songs, I'm super sorry, but subjective art is a skill, so give me! Without further introduction, let's get going. All 4 Seasons albums have a different central tone which is associated with their corresponding time of year. Spring opens up the project with a warm and welcoming feeling accompanied by acoustic guitar, piano, and pleasant synthy soundscapes. The laid-back songs are a majority upbeat and are perfect to listen to during a walk in the woods on a brisk yet warm day, and they make for an extremely comforting listening experience. The The whole atmosphere of the record has a naturey feel to it, and the critters on the cover being mossy and quite reminiscent of things you'll find in a forest, as well as the soft flowing melodies in every song. Nothing in this album is abrasive, and truly allows you to sink into it as though you're lying in a nice meadow, surrounded by the harmonies and quiet backing vocals which add flavor to each track. The way I plan on going through this is to examine each song off of each record one by one, seeing how they fit within the theme and how they are as a song, and then talking about the whole album afterwards. So let's get started with the opening track to Philip's 4-album project, I'll Never Be Sad Again. The whole idea of this album is getting over the sadness which comes from the latter months of the year and welcoming in a brand new one. This optimism can be foolish sometimes, but going into a new year with that mindset like Philip isn't the worst idea. He talks about how since he lacked serotonin for so long, he's now overflowing with it in the warmth of springtime. The song has him reflecting on his childhood and the happiness he's experienced in his youth, jumping on a trampoline and having supportive friends, but it also shows him doubting his happy mindset, asking if his happiness is nothing more than a performance. He tries to make sense of how this emotion works. He eventually lands on the true thesis statement of the album in this lyric.
Don't give up the fight. Every feeling has a season. I'm not alright, but I'm gonna be.
Accepting that never being sad again is an unreal claim to make, but that happiness isn't unreachable. There will always be times where we'll wallow in the depths of winter, but that doesn't mean that the joys of spring and summer will ever return. Everything fluctuates, and this song shows Philip understanding that and going into the new year with that mindset. This song also features the first occurrence of Philip talking to someone through his lyricism. He often refers to a you or mentions doing things as a we, though it's never explicitly stated who this person is.
I feel pretty good when I'm around you, and I feel pretty good when I'm alone.
We'll learn more about this person throughout the runtime of the project, but for now, it's obscure. Either way, these lyrics connected with the beautiful acoustic guitar in the verses make for an extremely comfortable listen. Add Philip's backing vocals and the explosion of sound in the chorus, and you've got a wonderful opening track which sets the tone for the rest of the album. Speaking of the rest of the album, let's move on to track number 2.
Push alerts for the dead. Pull the covers over my head.
Springtime is another song which talks about the transition between the depths of winter into the springtime, this time talking about habits instead of emotions. Being a young adult in the winter all alone can be pretty hard, as Philip says that he scrolls his phone as soon as he wakes up, as well as spending Christmas alone. He talks about these things over a quiet guitar and some distant synths, but as soon as the chorus hits, he's joined with drums and a bass and he goes into the spring.
I was inside for a long time, hit the space bar, stuck on quick time, and I lost a friend to a sick mind, but my tears dried and it's springtime.
Once again, he mentions this friend that he used to have, presumably the same person he spoke of in I'll Never Be Sad Again. He claims that it's his fault that he lost this person, but this, as well as the dullness of winter, are behind him now, as springtime is finally here. He asks himself if he can be a brand new person in the new year. He's prepared to let go of all of the things he did wrong in the past and try to become a better individual, one who won't scroll every morning and try to be in the moment.
This year we'll get it right. Finally it's springtime.
Then the bridge hits, and we learn that instead of truly moving on from everything he did in the year prior, he simply buried them in his memory, or in this case his garden. This may come up again, as just burying bad memories won't help you move from them, but until then, Philip sings a slowed down version of the chorus. While being a different and cool way to end to the track, it also alludes to Philip being unsure if this happy attitude he was so certain about in the prior song will work out so well. Overall, it goes into the new year with a happy demeanor. And the song itself is still super upbeat and fun. The pre-choruses mention Greek gods, something Weezer could never do, and the instrumentation is super fun to listen to, especially with the banjo you can hear in the second chorus. I think that's what I'm hearing. While the song which launched Philip onto online fame and potentially a one-hit wonder isn't on this album, a stripped-back acoustic version is. Shifted a few semitones and reduced to Philip's voice and a guitar, the song is more of an interlude in comparison to the more produced and lively songs from the album. I spoke about this song in detail at the start of this video, so I won't repeat myself, but I really enjoy this version of the song, as the reduced production makes you focus more on the other songs off the album instead of it. I think Philip pulled a really smart move here, as if you only came for this song, you could just go listen to the single version. But it encourages you to move past it to listen more to what the rest of Spring really has to offer. Still a beautiful track. I swear, the beginning of the song sounds exactly like Black Rainbows from Hawaii Part 2, and the part of my brain that is still recovering from my Tally Hall obsession was jump scared. Anyway, while some of the prior songs touched on this person, Bachelor's Degree is the first song that explicitly talks about the breakup Philip had during the prior year. Philip feels bad about how frequently he talks about his ex to his other friends, but explains that it helps in trying to get over her. He talks about how he spent so many hours, or basically months, trying to get over this person, and that he feels like he's so good at it now that he could teach a class on it. All of the different strategies he's used to move past the breakup could be used to teach all the future exes to get over her like he did. Much better plan than making a league of evil exes, in my opinion. In comparison to the last song, it has a lot more musical aspects in the form of drums, synth, bass, and a ton of other backing vocals. Little aspects like the high notes in the chorus and the little lo-fi break after he mentions having lo-fi breakup stations playing really shows the polish put onto this album. He concludes the chorus by saying,
But I think I'm finally ready to be bad at someone new.
Showing that he might not be a perfect partner, but he's ready to try to date someone else. Let's hope that his next date goes well and that he won't need to write a song about how bad it was. Well, alright. This song chronicles the aftermath of a date Philip went on in which he got stood up. The song starts slowly with drums and bass guitar, but as he continues to lament the occasion, it gets increasingly complex musically as well as increasing speed. He talks about a bunch of issues that he has with dating, such as trouble picking clothes, not trying to look needy by always sending texts, never being able to keep a plan, and the heartbreak you risk by trying in the first place. While it may seem that dating should be easier than ever now that the world is as connected as it is nowadays, he explains that it's a lot trickier. Texting is fairly new, which can be used as excuses for missing events. Online calendars could also provide an easy way out for forgetting to set a date, and especially the idea of Tinder.
And I'm not sure that Tinder is what Darwin had in mind.
In the end, Philip warns the listener about the dangers of modern dating and asks them not to allow what happened to him to occur again. Though he still is longing to love someone again and at least knows a few things not to do from the person who stood him up. It's still a super fun track, and the energy boost is just what this album needed after the last few slower tracks. This is the least played song out of the 11 on Spring, but it's not bad. It talks about Philip living a fairly simple life, and even though he knows that he could be embracing the wonders of the world, he's content with how it is.
I know life's supposed to be special, but it's just another day.
Not every single day has to be filled with travel and events or even seeing friends. It's completely reasonable and encouraged to take a few days to yourself and just be a little lazy. Wake up, eat some food, do some cleaning, and sleep. There's absolutely nothing wrong with taking some days to live your ordinary life. The chorus explains his usual routine and how he does do special things every now and then, but most of the time, it's, well, just another day of his silly little life. The bridge shows Philip imagining how he'll die, and instead of going to war or doing something heroic, he thinks he'll probably just die folding clothes or something typical like that. He doesn't seem sad about this though, and seems to embrace the life he lives. It's a nice little tune, and while it doesn't have any insane standout details like some other songs do, it fits with the thematic style of the album and is pleasant to listen to.
Jeff found a genie in a bottle who said,
Man, I hate Jeff. This song follows an imaginary character unlike the previous songs, which recounted stories or experiences from Philip's own life. While it's the shortest song on the album, it manages to fit a whole story inside of its short runtime. A guy named Jeff, finds a genie and is granted unlimited wishes. He does what most of us would do with this opportunity and wishes for unimaginable wealth, property, and luxurious modes of transport. Instead of being hated on by those around him, they actually celebrate that he was able to achieve what they all wanted.
They said, let's hear it for the man who has everything. By good fortune, he was set so far apart. Yeah, let's hear it for Jeff, who's got everything. 'Cause his wishes are only at the start.
Instead of being honored by all this praise, though, Jeff is scared of all the attention that he now has. The genie gives him an out by saying that he could give away some of his unlimited wishes. These people have been nothing but kind to him, and the genie seems to believe that Jeff is a good person. However, Jeff decides to do the more reasonable thing as kill the genie so that no one else can reach his point of status. This slightly changes how the public views Jeff.
Yeah, let's hear it for Jeff, who's got everything. Every single fucking thing except a heart.
This is probably an analogy for the billionaires and how the middle class shrinks as they grow prosperous, and how they can easily avoid taxes on their wealth while the working class suffers. But no matter how you interpret the song like that, or if it's just a show of human selfishness, I think that we can all agree that Jeff is a dick. Hey, so I'm a little stupid. The Jeff isn't just a random name, it is just Jeff Bezos. It is Jeff Bezos. He is talking about Jeff Bezos and how bad Jeff Bezos is, and it is just a commentary on Jeff Bezos. Sorry for getting that wrong. I feel like that's a fairly obvious thing to miss, but anyway, back to the video. Alright, this is my favorite song off of Spring, and I have no idea how it's the second least played from the album. Featuring Olive Klug as a guest performer, the song slows things down in comparison to the mostly upbeat tracks off of this record. While he's mentioned a breakup he's experienced before in the album, this is the first time we hear both sides of the situation. The verses show both of them telling the other to go away, and that the relationship is done.
Take your pottery and paintings. Take your sneakers back and run.
But it's not that easy, as the chorus says that there is now a literal and emotional blank spot where the other used to be it the things they used to keep at the other's home, and the part of their mind where the love for the other used to be. After the first chorus, the two seem to rethink things, as one asks the other to call them when they get home, and one doesn't want to throw away the gift that the other painted for them. The bridge shows some thinking about their lives after the breakup, and wishing that they could live the other's life, even though both sides are struggling in their own way. They think that the other isn't as hurt as they are, and that if they were on the other side of the relationship, it wouldn't be as hard. It's a fantastic and emotional song made all the better with Olive's vocals. They do a fantastic job harmonizing with Philip to make the incredible track even better overall. The plucky guitar throughout on top of the flowy synths combine to me an incredible soundscape, which I come back to listen to over and over again. And it's definitely the most underrated song from the album. Café LaRue features Philip as a waiter at some sort of place before life in the form of, well, a cafe, where a soul gets to pick what type of life they fancy. He introduces plenty of different life paths and relates them to a meal, such as a mother and wife being a basic but popular option that some people don't care for the taste of, and that a bit of spice could be added in the form of an affair. If you're looking for a happy and wealthy life in the form of a lottery winner or a tech billionaire along the lines of that damn Jeff, you're out of luck, as either the cafe's fresh out of the meal, or it's a bit above your budget. As the listener struggles with the decision, Philip reminds them that once you make your pick, you cannot send the meal back, and you'll have to eat the whole thing till you die. And if you're upset with your decision, you only have yourself to blame, as you're the one who picked the order. Also, the chorus in this song is easily one of my favorites from the project, as it's catchy as shit.
Are you crushed? Are you steamed? Are you fried? Tell us what kind of life would you like? It's a diet, you'll down till you die. But darling, you get to decide.
I tried to Google translate the name, but I just got Cafe the Street. It's also a real cafe and has a lot of locations, so I'm not sure if the name is just cool sounding and French, but it works either way. In a similar fashion to Just Another Day, Philip talks about being a fairly average person living a fairly average life. However, in this scenario, he expected to be a lot more than just average. In childhood, people expect that they'll be a massive influence in the world, be it being a millionaire, super tall, or just having all the hard work they put into school be worth it. While Philip believed in all of these things and none of them came true, I'm taller than him, he's settled into this life and seems fairly content with it.
I'm Mr. Shoes Tied, Mr. Deep Sigh, Mr. I'm doing alright. I'm Mr. Hindsight, Mr. Fine Life, Mr. Peaked in junior high. I used to think I'd be the man, but now I think I'm just some guy.
There's a stigma with not doing anything like world-changing with your life, and an expectation of becoming a massive figure in the world, but in this song, Philip embraces having a normal life. As he says in the bridge, he loves being able to live without being seen, and not having others constantly having an opinion of what he does. He doesn't have the pressure of being famous, and can just live his life without being recognized, or having everyone know who he is. While this isn't entirely true, as he does have 60,000 monthly listeners on Spotify, he doesn't have the degree of fame where he'd be called out every time he steps outside. As he says in the final words of the song,
I used to think I'd be the man, but now I think I'm just some guy. Thank you.
the final song on the Spring album is super fun. There's nothing sad about it at all, and it's just a super fun time. Okay, that's not entirely true. The song features a plucky guitar which sounds like something you'd find in a medicine commercial, where Philip talks about how wonderful his life is, talking about the simple things like folding clothes and having a healthy sleep schedule. He claims that he's finally feeling okay and that he knows he was born to just kind of hang out. He's just there, and he's living life, and he's doing great. However, once we get to the bridge, we realize that he's just saying these things to make himself feel better, as the happy melody is interrupted by a news broadcast.
Climate change is now rapid, widespread, and intensifying. That is according to a devastating report by the UN's Intergovernmental Panel on Climate Change, which warns that many human-caused effects are now irreversible. The UN Secretary General called the findings a code red for humanity.
After this, we get a more realistic peek into Philip's life, as he admits to being sad and that things aren't looking fantastic for the world. But instead of trying to be super happy or drowning in the sadness, he just tries to be okay. If he can do that, he'll want to stick around in the world regardless of how disastrous it's looking. This is a really good track to transition into summer, as where spring was joyful and happy, summer isn't always that. Spring is a fantastic feel-good album which perfectly reflects on the blossoms and new growth of nature of the season. It shows how uplifting it is coming out of an increasingly warm winter and provides a bit of hope for the new year, hoping that it will be better than the prior one. Its instrumentation works wonders with its flowing synths and the peaceful guitars throughout, but isn't without some more upbeat songs littered throughout. The album digs deeper into Philip's relationship, which ended, but also has a bunch of silly songs too. It's super fun, and I completely understand why it's the most popular album of the four. However, this may be an unpopular opinion, but it's only my third favorite from the project. It's still a solid 7.5 out of 10 for me, and while I love listening to it, there's two more which I find superior melodically and storytelling-wise. But before we can get to those, we'll have to brave the fire and warmth of summer, so let's get going. Summer, as with its respective season, is a lot more in your face with its themes. While it has the same signature flavor of sound, which I've come to know from Philip, it's clearly a lot more pop-oriented. The flowing soundscapes of spring have been replaced with snappy guitar, quick piano riffs, and far more apparent backing drums. It's got more typical popular song stereotypes with an easy-to-remember as well as easy-to-digest chorus, padded with some upbeat licks to get you into the track. Most of the songs go over fairly base-level concepts, along with some simpler lyrics, but still manages to put something special in each of the 12 songs. With that out of the way, let's get started. The song opens with an electric guitar squeak, which leads into a riff which sounds like that one Brian David Gilbert song. Okay, I have looked through Brian David Gilbert's entire discography, and I have no idea what I was talking about. I was just writing the script, I didn't leave any notes, so I have no idea what song I was referencing, so I don't know, And needless to say, you can instantly tell that it's a much different tone from Spring. Instead of whimsical, it's just regular old upbeat pop sound, and it sets the theme for the album right away. Philip tries a new approach in moving on from his breakup in this album, and that he seems to just be trying to forget that it ever happened. He seems to look away from the past and tries to stay in the present moment, attempting to give a positive spin on everything. The first verse seems to show the aftermath of Spring, in which he feels hurt by remembering the 2-year relationship and coming out of it worse. He wonders how he could possibly move on, until the chorus provides him an answer.
I forget, pain slips out of my head, so I always come off bright-eyed, like no one's hurt me yet.
He lets the lows of his emotional state go in an attempt to live out the remainder of the year a happy person who hasn't been wronged. This is the thesis that Philip tries to live out through this album, but as you'll see soon enough, it won't work out fantastically for him. But for now, he's forgotten, and will just live in the moment for whatever wonders or disasters this summer has to offer. This song continues Philip's strategy of ignoring the past and not worrying about his recently ended relationship, and the way he does it this time is by celebrating loneliness. Outside of the narrative, I completely understand having a period of time where interacting with people doesn't seem quite right, and staying alone for a while sounds much more appealing. However, while Philip uses this as an excuse to ignore his problems at first, he seems to really end up enjoying this loner season idea. He doesn't seem to like the concept of getting married in this song, pointing out that he wouldn't want to never have some personal space.
They pick out the spots for their cemetery plots. Can't even get some space when they get buried.
He doesn't want to be called a pet name by someone who wants to steal all of his time, or even go to a meal with someone that he doesn't want to spend time with at the moment. He admits that this mindset isn't the best thing, but at the very least, he's freed from the shackles of being in a relationship. So, he repeats the chorus one last time.
It's loner season. I've got my reasons.
The word season itself is used throughout the album very scarcely, along with the whole project honestly, so having a full song, having it in the title is a bold move. While also showing that this feeling of being happy alone is temporary, it also has a more literal meaning. This summer will actually be a loner season for Philip, and the rest of the songs off the album will reflect this. It's still got a fun tone to it with a lot of pop aspects, and it is a really fun track to listen to, even if it's a tad basic and the lyrics are a little bit sad.
I told my mom about us. I told her I'm not sure it's working.
This is easily the most digestible song off the album, as it sounds so poppy and could easily be on the radio. It makes sense that this is one of the lead singles before the album's release. The super produced track opens with Philip talking at a point in which he's still in the relationship he keeps mentioning. He talks about all the people who he's confided in about how he thinks the relationship is going, and reveals that he was not broken up with, but that he was equally unhappy with this person. He tells his mom that he doesn't think it's going to work out and that he isn't happy, but he can't convince himself to leave her.
I can't leave, but I can't stay. I'm crossing off another day in your room. Guess I'm never gonna leave you.
The chorus shows his internal monologue as he screams out that he doesn't want to be in the relationship anymore, but it's gotten to a point where he just can't easily get out. He wishes for his old apartment, which we'll hear about soon, and his old life where he was all alone. We've seen how he enjoys loneliness at times in the prior song, and in this moment he's together with a person that he doesn't like anymore. He wants to escape, but he feels selfish, as since he's said that he's loved her in the past, it wouldn't be right to change his mind and ruin her life. The song concludes with him repeating the phrase, "I don't want to be here anymore," knowing that if he ever goes through with his wishes, someone will get hurt. But if he chooses to stay unhappy, he'll be hurt. It's a terrible catch-22, which by context clues, we see he picked the former option, but the way he presented it is really interesting. It's super produced to sound like a pop song. I mean, it is a pop song, but it's really meant to be sung along with and enjoyed by the masses. He makes it sound like a common problem to all the listeners to relate with, as opposed to the likes of spring and the upcoming winter, which shows him pouring his heart out in his songs. It doesn't sound like a confession of these feelings as much as it is him attempting to normalize them to make himself feel better. If the song is relatable, he isn't the only person with this problem, and therefore, it's not as big of a deal as he makes it out to be. It's a really interesting parallel to what we've heard in songs like Blank Spot and the rest of Spring, and continues to set an interesting tone for the pop album.
Some other guy ruined all your favorite theaters in LA.
I'm seeing a theme between the least played songs on each album so far. First it was Just Another Day, and now it's Some Other Guy. Most likely a coincidence, but still an interesting connection. This song sounds a lot more like the stuff I've heard on Spring, while still having the signature summer sound, and it works pretty well. It talks about how Philip's relationship has problems on both sides. As we've seen his side of things, we're now seeing the other. This woman was hurt by their ex in many ways, which made her permanently uneasy about dating again. He worked in theater, and when she found out that Philip was also interested in theater, she was extremely wary. The guy also dropped her after a random day, so when Philip forgot to text, she thinks that he left her. This cycle of fear and disappointment this person was put through makes it hard for her to trust Philip, even though he's trying to show her how he's not like that guy.
1,000 pinpricks made you fear some other guy would reappear. You pushed away 1,000 times. How can I convince you that I'm not some other guy?
Philip genuinely means well in this situation, but it's hard as she keeps expecting him to be a bad person, as it's the only experience she's had. She keeps pushing these expectations onto Philip, which makes him more and more unhappy in the relationship, and she starts to make him want to leave, as we saw in the previous song. After being used, she begins using him, and she kept pushing Philip further and further until he had to stop. This is shown in the final chorus, which is an incredible conclusion to the track with its lyricism.
1,000 pinpricks made you fear. You crushed them down on me for years. I had to leave. I can't survive. Finally, you turned me into some other guy.
After all he tried to do for her, she ended up seeing him as yet another bad guy for leaving her, even though it was her fault. Philip tried to be there for her and convince her that he wasn't like the others, but after everything she expected him to do, he just couldn't keep up. And now she sees him as the villain. An extremely underrated track, which isn't nearly as popular as it should be, but I can understand why it doesn't have too many plays. It's a little slow at the start and only really starts up after the first chorus, but the other verses and especially the bridge make it worth it.
There's a version of you in somebody's head.
After a brief return to the honesty of Spring, we are once again thrown into the pop zone as we go into Never Date a Writer. The song shows Philip warning the listener from dating a writer, as they can get inspiration from anything and anyone. I've written a few screenplays, and several of the characters I've written were inspired by some of my friends at the time, but the way Philip talks about it isn't quite as nice. He says that they'll take your worst qualities and put them into the characters they write about to get their feelings or trauma out. They'll put every bad experience they shared with you into their art, and seeing that on a stage or a screen could be really upsetting to watch. It seems like Philip has had this experience with this, which resulted in someone writing a version of him which combined all the negative attributes into a character.
Blood on the page and the ink's still wet, and they don't forgive and they don't forget. They only remember the worst of you. The facts are wrong, but it still feels true.
Now you might be thinking, isn't he not taking his own advice by making this song? Or for that matter, most of the songs in this project so far? He admits to this in the final chorus where he says,
Never date a writer, and I'm a writer too. I'll ring you out for feelings, cause that's just what I do.
by writing about the person he was in a relationship with, He's risking the chance that she'll listen and think that he only put the worst aspects of her into his work. He knows that he'd hate it to happen to him, but it seems that he has to continue talking about her. We'll learn a little more about it later, but in terms of the song itself, I've got to say this is one of my least favorites. It's alright, but I just don't care for the melody and it's a bit slow. Not terrible though.
I looked away for a second to finish a bottle of wine.
I am going to admit, stupid me thought that Anhedonia was the name of Philip's ex for a second, but a quick Google search reveals that its real meaning is the inability to feel pleasure. This feeling for Philip comes from his ex gaslighting him into not enjoying things, and the song goes through his experiences with this. This relates to the prior few songs and him wanting to get out of the relationship, as we see in the chorus.
Anhedonia, Anhedonia, we work so well at the start. Anhedonia, my therapist says we should part.
He explains how she would call his other friends liars and that she's the only person who actually cares about him. And based on the title of the song, this turned out to work. If he tried to leave, she knew he'd just come crawling back to her because of all she's done to convince him no one else cares about him. All this being presented in a more melancholic sound in comparison to the upbeat tone of the previous summer songs, as well as being in 3/4 time signature, I think, makes this song a lot more powerful than the rest. He tries to escape, but as he belts in the chorus for her to get out of his head, and this eventually ends up working. But the song seems to once again be in the past tense. The last few songs have been all about this relationship and how damaging it was for both her and Philip. So let's move on to a more fun topic, like climate change.
It's too hot out.
Something I haven't mentioned quite yet is that every album in the Seasons project has a title track somewhere. Spring has Springtime, and now we have Summer, also known as It's Too Hot Out. This is probably my least favorite song from the project. It's just a tad over the top when it comes to delivering its message, and while a song like this was inevitable for an album literally called and about summer, I'm still not too thrilled that it's here. If you can't guess from the title, this song is about it being a little too hot outside than it probably should be. He criticizes the government for not caring enough about the climate crisis, saying how he could fry an egg on the walls of the White House, and how he wonders if they only think climate activists will die due to the crisis, and not, well, them. He talks about how ridiculous it is that we aren't caring enough about the situation and how we have to basically beg the empty-headed government to do something about it, even when everyone's lives are at stake. He says that the world is being irrational, as everyone should be worried about this, as literally everyone could die over it, and it seems to be more in focus of smaller issues instead of, well, the bigger one.
Think of the loss of the blue-collar jobs led by industry mobs. Oh, fuck off, it's too hot. Think of the debt, those poor privatized jets. Would you rather be poor or be dead?
The song ends with him repeating the title over and over again, and it's a very poignant ending for sure. The whole song knows exactly what it's trying to say and holds back no punches. And while he's completely right in every lyric, it's still not my favorite by any means. The sampling of Vivaldi's Summer portion of his Four Seasons compositions in the opening of the song is quite a powerful way to start it off, but the rest is just kinda mid. While it's powerful lyrically, I wouldn't really choose to listen to the song itself if I wanted to jam out to something. I know what the title of this video says, but hey, it's not every song that has to be amazing. Anywho, moving on to Philip's second most popular song.
Apartment A is cold as ice because she knows she's hot.
Once again talking about anything but his relationship, In My Apartment shows Philip reflecting on his current living situation in the apartment complex. He begins by introducing a few people who live in the complex with him, such as a vain woman, a communist, a drug dealer, and two heartbroken people who live below and above Philip's room. Philip imagines scenarios for these people, thinking that they might end up together, but we'll ultimately never know. I honestly wonder what Philip's neighbors thought of him while recording this song. I mean, from what he knows about all the people living with him, the walls have got to be pretty thin, right? They probably would hear. He goes on to say that the complex's residents always have his back and are kind people, even though they're basically a collection of random people who ended up living together by chance. Then Philip transitions into one of the prettiest choruses to come out of the project, and one of the best ones I've heard in general.
In my apartment, there's nothing in between us but some plaster. In my apartment, we gossip and we spy and we have sex. In my apartment, never asked to be a part of this collective, sharing nothing.
It sounds so nice, and it's just a super satisfying listen. After all the songs about his ex, which are in no means bad, it's nice to have a song talking about something lighthearted and fun. This is the only song from Anything But Spring to be in his top 5 popular tracks on Spotify, as well as being the only other song of his with over 1 million plays. God, he's so underrated. Anyway, back to the song. He talks about some other residents, like a guy who has a wonderful garden but attracts a bunch of ants, and a married woman who Philip likes and has a suspicion that her husband is cheating. He doesn't go out too frequently, so he's gotten to know these 80 other people living with him really well. And he finds it funny to think that there are more of them that would show up at his funeral than his actual family. But of course he brings up the idea of finally moving out and living on his own. And he says, well, he'd love the quiet, a part of him would always miss the chaos of the complex. It's a really interesting relationship which he explores in the song, and it's pretty cool. Definitely one of my favorites from the album, and I completely understand why it's as popular as it is.
If you know me, I've been feeling overwhelmed since 03.
After the intensity of summer and the chill vibes of In My Apartment, we're right back into the pop sound with Hot and Dumb. Philip talks about how he's always stressed out, for good reason, and how he always has to be working and overthinking things. He thinks about how much better his life would be if he didn't have to worry about any of that stuff and be, well, hot and, get this, dumb.
I wanna be hot and dumb. Seems like it's a lot more fun. Six-pack out, top down, feel the wind blow. Unexamined life, that's the anthem for the himbo.
Hearing the word himbo in a song is a little wild, but alright. The whole song has a lot of little aspects which are interesting to say the least. We've got this little thing in the verses and the random calls in the background of the song which sound straight out of the late 2000s, as well as the modulation in the second pre-chorus which sounds really chaotic. There's also this thing he says at the end.
Yeah.
Well, the first few songs are really good.
I don't hate this song. The music video is wonderful. I love all of Philip's fits and makeup so very much, but instead of sounding like a pop song, it sounds more like a bunch of stereotypical pop attributes glued together. I do like how he sings the chorus, it's very satisfying and silly, but the rest of the song is just, The bridge especially goes crazy when he starts talking about God. He talks about how God made him smart and perfect, and he'd much rather be dumb instead so he doesn't have to worry about anything. It's not bad by any means, but it's just all over the place and not really my cup of tea. Well, let's hope the next song isn't any wilder. I wonder what it's called. More capitalism commentary! Yippee! This song actually has a really nifty little gimmick where some of the verses start with an acronym and follows it with words which fit the acronym. Okay, I'm kinda bad at explaining it, but here, look.
This song is an NFT, a new fun test of what art can be.
Now to the song itself. It starts with an upbeat guitar riff, which leads into Philip's vocals about how the song is an NFT. For the lucky few who don't know, an NFT is a terrible idea in which you can own a digital piece of art, like a PNG or an MP3. If you've seen these ugly ass apes before, that's an NFT. Can't you just screenshot it? I hear you asking, and the answer is yes. He says that if the song was really an NFT, one person could technically say they own the song, but everyone else will just stream it or listen to it on the record anyway. He says that it's a shame that it's gotten to a point where we have to sell things like NFTs and cameos just to get by, seeing as everything has been monetized and democratized. And it's a pretty interesting commentary. It's a fairly decent song, but it can't really hold a candle in comparison to the next track, so let's move right along.
I wake up, check my phone.
Holy shit. The absolutely insane tonal shift between this song as an NFT to this should be illegal. On my first listen to the album, I expected there to be a song about climate change and how shitty the world is, seeing as the theme of the album is summer. And after hearing It's Too Hot Out, I thought that was going to be it. Then I saw this strange lowercase song and wondered what it was going to be. But I was not mentally prepared for this. The reason it's lowercase is because all of the songs on the upcoming winter album are also lowercase, and those are all sad as shit. I think Philip misplaced a winter song here because it's completely different from the rest of summer. It has a muted piano which is slowly joined by an increasingly powerful violin backing track. He talks about how disastrous the state of the world is in such a casual tone, saying how as soon as he wakes up, he's reminded that the world is ending from scrolling on his phone. Even though this should be devastating news, it's so normalized and frequent at this point that he just goes to work without giving it a second thought. This is encapsulated by him saying that the world is sorta ending. It's become so casual to say that we don't even take it seriously anymore. He thinks about all the terrible things that happen in our world, like lockdown shooter drills in schools, and how most people vote based on what lowers taxes instead of saving the world, and just seeing everything on the news, which is upsetting. The chorus hits and Philip finally raises his voice, talking about how far protesters go and how someone lit themselves on fire to bring attention to what's happening, and how half the world still doesn't care. The world is ending, but he still has to keep up with his 9 to 5. He doesn't want to leave the world, but it's so hard in our current society to take a second to relax. Mental health is getting more widespread attention, but still not nearly enough. And with everything that's happening, anxiety and depression is only going to get harder to deal with. Philip states that all he really wants is something, just one thing to believe in, so that he can carry on. If one thing in the world can go right, that would be enough. The song is heartbreaking and beautiful, and it doesn't even matter that it's out of place in the album. Seasonal depression is usually linked to winter, but summer can be extremely depressing as well. With the days of summer getting increasingly warm, it's hard to think of anything else. Philip said that this was the reason the song was written.
I wrote one kind of sad song on summer, and it was because last summer when I was producing this record, I got the news that it was the hottest summer ever on record. That was last summer. This is now the hottest summer on record. We're taking bets on what next summer will be. So I wrote a song. Summer didn't feel complete without something about that.
This song is also one of the few from the project to have a full music video, which makes an incredible statement in and of itself, and it's just fantastic. Easily one of my favorite songs from the 42, and its gut-punching placement as the penultimate song in the album works wonders. Now, how the hell are we going to conclude the album now? Going back into the personal narrative, Philip concludes the album by thinking about all the problems he's been singing about and wondering if it would be better if it happened all over again. If the two of them got a second chance together, would all the same issues pop up again, or would their relationship finally work out? No matter how much he tries to move past the breakup, be it knowing how problematic it was, trying to forget, or just embracing being single, it seems he still misses her and what they had. So he fantasizes about getting back together, even though from what we've heard in the album, it seems really unlikely that it would work out.
Redo. If we had a second chance, baby, what would we do? If I ask in the right way, tell me you might say me too. I know we're not gonna, but I just wonder what we'd do with a redo.
However, as the album approaches its ending, Philip realizes that this is just a dream and that it wouldn't work if they got back. He accepts that he's alone for now, and that the relationship is over, and seems to move on knowing that he chose to leave and now must lie in the bed he made. However, he starts to sing the chorus again, and the album ends on a final upbeat stinger. It seems like this isn't the end of the story, and I guess that makes sense seeing how there's 2 more albums, but still. It's a nifty little song to close the album with, but nothing crazy good. All in all, I think Summer is a good album. It's fun, and clearly Philip was able to be a bit more experimental with the tone and sound of his work. There's a few good bops throughout which I'd like to go back and listen to, like Loner Season, I Don't Want to Be Here Anymore, and especially In My Apartment. However, some of the songs just don't really work out too well, specifically Hot and Dumb, as well as the song as an NFT. Philip puts on some fun concepts in there, but as a song, I don't love them. I'm not huge on radio pop, and a lot of these songs sound really pandering towards that type of audience, and it's pretty on and off. However, a few of the songs are slower and sound more like what we've heard on Spring and what Winter will sound like, and Anhedonia and Something to Believe. Something to Believe especially takes the cake on the album, easily foreshadowing all but possibly In My Apartment in quality and power. While definitely my least favorite of the Four Seasons albums, I'd still give it a 6 out of 10, as while it is a hit or miss record, the hits are much more prominent than the misses. On to Autumn. Welcome to Peak City. Autumn completely changes things up by giving Philip a big freaking band. It's an extremely jazzy record which perfectly encapsulates the fun feeling of a walk through fallen leaves and wearing jackets to enter the brisk fall air. With a shorter runtime of only 8 songs, it manages to provide enough zesty instrumentation to fill up a whole season, and you won't even notice that it's so much shorter than the other albums. Now let's get started with a little motivational pep talk from Philip. Opening up with a pleasant little piano ditty, the spotlight shines on Philip as he talks about how promising life seems when you're younger. This reflects on the positive vibes on most of spring and some of summer's songs, making it seem like the world is your oyster and you can do anything you fancy. Kids are told that they could be anything they want to be, and that their wildest dreams are just a few years of school and a good amount of determination away from being achieved. However, Philip turns this narrative around by saying that they don't say the most important things. And with a flair of jazzy orchestra, Philip decides that he will be the one to carry the message everyone really needs to hear at a young age. What is that message, you ask? Well, let's hear it from the man himself.
Life is just a compromise, it's better for your health. You might achieve a smaller dream, so look inside yourself. Why do you want the big career and all that fancy stuff? Give up, give up, give up, give up, give up.
He sets it straight that you should really lower your expectations of greatness so that you're not really disappointed in yourself when you don't achieve them. Some things just aren't worth the effort, and ultimately they don't really matter. You could never smoke and still die in your sleep, so why bother putting in all the energy to stay away? This is Philip's advice, not mine. Don't smoke, kids. After explaining all of this over some upbeat ruckus of a big band tune, the bridge goes into a huge instrumental break which is just awesome. I am an absolute sucker for anything jazzy, and this whole album is like a delicious treat for my ears. Moving past the break though, Philip talks about how once you grow up and don't make a name for yourself, you'd feel a lot less depressed if you never expected anything. This is a fairly decent motto, but I wouldn't call it just giving up. You should try for greatness, but don't expect it to be handed right to you. Overall though, it's still a super fun song, and the dark message over the happy sounding instrumental reminds me a lot of Will Wood's Memento Mori or several Bo Burnham songs, and it makes for a wonderful intro to this brilliant album. Deltarune? No. This song covers the story of a man who clearly didn't follow Philip's advice from the previous song and wholeheartedly believes that he's meant for something great and is above everyone else. He may not be leading the life he knows he deserves, but still believes that he is a big shot. This extremely selfish guy only sees what he's doing as a way to progress in the world. Having affairs and sex so his memoir will be interesting, yelling at a poor clerk at the grocery store just because he believes he's so much better, and just being a general jerk.
Anything to feel like a big shot, like a big shot. Anything to wear the crown.
But we see that his life isn't all that grand, as his fancy car he drives is just a rental, his marriage is fairly shaky, and it's been 20 years since he's graduated and hadn't done anything notable. He feels like the great life he's worthy of has been unjustly taken from him. He should be a millionaire, not a rundown middle-class worker just scraping by. He claims that God somehow messed up his life, and that he should be famous by now. What he didn't understand was that he actually has to work to become famous and successful, and that no good life will just be given to him. By the time he finally dies, no one recognizes him as the big shot he tried so poorly to become, and only by the selfish prick he always was in his life. He just died another random guy who everyone hated and never ended up becoming anything. All this over some more bombastic jazzy instrumental makes for a fantastic song, which is fun from start to finish, and emphasizes the message Philip presented in the album opener. Super fun so far. Meaning being satisfied or something which is pleasant, Hunky Dory finds Philip talking in the present tense about being in the early days of his relationship, or just a pleasant moment the two shared. He talks about enjoying his life with her, even though their financial situation is about as bad as the current state of the world. Their living conditions aren't superb, and the jobs that they work at are annoying and tedious. But with the two of them together, it's worth it. This message, accompanied with the jazzy piano and trumpet, creates a super upbeat song which reflects how Philip felt in those frugal yet enjoyable days.
Some people have a diamond ring, and I in a diamond hue. But those folks don't have everything. They don't get to look at you.
These happy times can't last forever though, as Philip eventually looks at his living state and realizes that love isn't enough to get through life. Despite what the Hallmark movies say, you still need to have a stable job to get by in the world. And while he'll miss living with this person, he'll always have the memories of the happy times that they spent together, and while they were awfully poor, it was still worth it. So eventually Philip moves on, and despite some seeing him as selfish for leaving her for money, in the time they spent together, it was wonderful. It just wasn't working anymore. I'm honestly not sure if this one is about the same person we've heard of, because Philip tends to flip back and forth on whether he misses or hates them. This song makes it sound like it was lovely, but then we go back to songs like Anadonia and you get a completely different feel. Relationships are three-dimensional, so I can see how there were positive and negative aspects, and we'll see how this story wraps up over the next two albums. Anyway, next up is easily one of my favorite songs from the whole project. It's really good, and I like it a lot, and I'm so excited to talk about it. Like, you have no idea how cool this song is, and I hope you're really looking forward to hearing this segment. I bet you'll never guess what the song's called. It's a super cool name, and golly, it's just a fun song. Alright, fine, it's
Anticipation, better than the real thing.
Unlike a majority of the songs thus far, this song features a guest artist in the form of Katie Lynn Charbot, a Nashville-based artist. It talks about the wonders of anticipating something and how the technologies of today, which provide instant gratification, lessens the impact of things. He also connects this to expecting how wonderful a life with someone could be and imagining all the possibilities beforehand. Opening with a longer than anticipated drumstick count in, the chill vibes of the song start as soon as Philip begins singing.
Don't give me a present. Tell me you got me a present that's arriving soon. 2-day shipping is the death of having something to look forward to.
Instantly, the song is obviously a jam, which sounds immaculate. Wonderful job, Philip. But the simple message is so nice to hear about. Going into the chorus, though, Philip begins to sing about how, along with anticipating deliveries and events, he anticipates the life the two of them could end up living together, saying how whenever he's feeling down, he looks towards the future for some comfort. This song's perspective seems to come from before any negative events in the relationship occurred, as Philip is seeming rather positive about how things will turn out. The next verse shows Katie representing the other side of the relationship. She sings about how perfect she expects Philip to be, thinking that he can do no wrong because he loves her so much he wouldn't dare. She seems real manipulative here as she claims that she doesn't want a real boyfriend, but just someone who will do anything for her. We see how her vision of Philip affects him in songs like Anadonia, but right now both sides are anticipating very different things from each other. The second chorus features both of them singing, which provides an extremely different definition of the lyrics when you look at the woman's side.
And you might be better in my head than you could ever be, and that's not fair to you, but it's fun for me.
In Philip's perspective, he thinks that his imagined life might not be as good as it will turn out to be, but while it's not exactly fair to expect something more from his lover, it's fun to imagine how it could be. On the other hand, however, she fully anticipates him to follow her every desire and to be the perfect person for her. She knows that he might not be able to do this, and if he does, it will be extremely unfair to his side of the relationship. But ultimately, she finds it fun to manipulate him like that. It's an absolute bop of a song with some pretty dark lyrics, but on casual listening, it's just a super fun song. This is in a similar fashion to a lot of the songs from Summer, and I really love this aspect of Philip's songwriting. It's definitely one of my top songs from him and makes the album so much better as a whole.
Los Angeles, you bright and beautiful town.
This song is all about Philip's wonderful move to the City of Angels, Los Angeles. As you'll soon hear, he absolutely loves the city. He explains how right after he graduated, he looked towards a famous city and the riches and success he could gain by simply living there. Imagine a life in Hollywood and starring in films until you retire, but he quickly realizes that the city isn't quite what the famous folks make it look like.
Of Los Angeles, where the weather is fine, but you won't feel the heat or the sweetness on Sunset and Vine, where careers start when you're born and end at 29. Still the magic is hard to resist.
As it turns out, the city is filled with a bunch of really shady places and characters alike. He critiques the culture of young actors like himself, saying how careers can end for them as soon as they turn 30, as they aren't desirable anymore. Along with this, he mentions all the time you waste doing menial things on the way to auditions and gigs, like the painfully long red lights. Regardless of all this though, Philip admits that there's still a whole lot of magic in the city. You can grab drinks with friends, walk along the same places where famous individuals have been, and if you can't afford to do any of that, you've still got the beautiful oceanfront a quick jog away. Ultimately, LA may not be the cleanest, or nicest, or generally best place to live, but there are still a bunch of elements that make it worth it. And Philip has gotten acting gigs, so clearly it's not impossible to get some work. The big band on this track is super fun and jazzy as usual, and the vibes are immaculate. Starting out with a super fun group of brass instruments, Another Round presents the first ever Philip Labe song to feature a guest artist for the second time in one album. This time around, it's Katie Georgi. This song goes over how the two of them seem to constantly bicker. Every single little thing, from what one thinks the other should wear to how one thinks the other's haircut looks, but instead of being constantly upset about this, both sides agree that it's perfectly natural to get into arguments and they actually appreciate each other for it. In a strange plot twist, it seems that the two are actually a little happy together when they argue. Katie says that a little disagreement never hurts and in fact could help keep a relationship together.
Sparks fly, long fights, but fighting with my baby is a thing that I like.
It's a good test to see if the people in the relationship truly care about each other, as if they don't, then a simple argument could result in the end of it all. After a truly legendary instrumental bridge, the two sit down after an argument and agree that sharing your true feelings with each other, even when they collide with the others, is an important part of a relationship. Even though we've seen a lot of negativity between these two, it's nice to know that it wasn't all torture for Philip and that there were some really nice parts too. It seems like from Hunky Dory and his part of Anticipation, the whole album is shining light on the good parts of the relationship. I wonder how it'll all be resolved. Philip serenades us about how he's learned throughout his many attempts that love doesn't just happen, and you have to put some effort into making it all work out. It seems that after his previous attempt going so awry, he wants to share his knowledge with any listeners so that they don't end up experiencing the same thing as him.
And you can't skip the small talk phase. Intimacy takes a couple 100 days. You can't speed read a person's mind. Sex is a blast, but the feelings don't last. Love takes time.
Building up a meaningful relationship isn't easy, and he talks about the hundreds of conversations over coffee or another drink which creates the support beams needed to get something started. Philip wishes that it was just as easy to make a romantic connection as it was to meet a friend at a bar, but it's impossible to get to know someone's whole life in a matter of hours. It's a really sweet little song, but there's not an awful lot of substance here. Still has the jazzy vibes and it's a fun song to listen to, but dare I say, it's a little filler. Regardless of that though, we have the eponymous track remaining, so let's wrap this album up. Being the longest song in the Four Seasons project, just under 6 minutes in length, Autumn is an ode to the season and the comfort it brings between the existential dread of both summer and winter. The slower and quieter piano melody brings a vibe which is a far cry from the excitement of Give Up and Big Shot we've heard from the start of the album, and sounds a little bit more like what we're going to be hearing in winter. He sings about how comforting the brisk breezes and falling leaves are after hiding away from the heat waves and awful news, and that now that it's here, he can just watch summer fade away and the superior season begins its time.
Wake up now, the whole world is a cherry. Don't fall asleep, there's so much left to see. It's easy to forget it's temporary. Autumn, thanks for reminding me.
Being the longest season, summer can feel like it drags out, but autumn reminds us that even in the hardest times and hottest of days, there's still just, well, a season. Philip wants to stay in this time between two difficult seasons and just enjoy life. As we've seen in the majority of the album, he's able to have a lot of fun in autumn. Now that he's showing his true emotions though, instead of just the fun upbeat tones of Los Angeles in Anticipation, we see Philip begging to stay inside the comfort of this season. The extent of how temporary this period of ignorance truly can be is shown both in the length of the album, being the shortest of the four, and the length of the song showing Philip milking the last of the time he has here. However, he eventually realizes that he has to move on, and autumn can't last forever. And in accepting that, Philip says some of the best lyrics, in my opinion, that he's ever written.
Autumn, I know you must be going. I guess that there's no knowing if I'll see you next year.
This is what I imagine he looked like writing this. This line can be interpreted in several ways. For one, with rising temperatures, the seasons are going to start to shift, meaning that in the time autumn typically is, we could start having weather similar to what we see in summer. He doesn't know if he'll ever see another autumn again just like the one he's living in right now, and while it's unlikely that next year won't have one, over time we could start to lose it. However, the second meaning of this lyric means something entirely different. When he says that he isn't sure if he'll see autumn next year, he doesn't mean that autumn itself will go away, but that he might not live to see it. Be it increased global conflict, a worldwide pandemic, or potentially even ending his own life due to how awful the world is right now. It's only a few sentences, but these lyrics add a whole nother level of depth to this song, as it's placed in the bridge during a quiet part of the backing instrumental. Afterwards though, we return to the original pace as he watches the season fade away as we enter the winter. Aside from the absolute sobfest which is Autumn the song, Autumn the album is an extremely fun record which embraces its instrumental tone perfectly from front to back. The jazzy tone fits Philip's voice extremely well as his songwriting, and it manages to keep your attention after the prior two albums by mixing it up. Where Spring and Summer had similar sounding tracks, nothing on Autumn sounds like something we've heard before, and unfortunately it won't sound like something we'll ever hear again. It has a perfect balance between songs which tell an original story by Philip such as Big Shot in Los Angeles, giving advice to those listening in Give Up and Autumn, and even more personal tracks about Philip's relationship as in Hunky Dory and Anticipation. Even though it only has 8 songs, Autumn manages to show off Philip's songwriting range way better than Summer did, and that's super impressive. While a majority of the songs are fantastic, there are a few which weren't quite as good, such as Love Takes Time, but overall I'd still give the album a strong 8 out of 10. This definitely is in my top 2 albums from the project, but we have one more to go through before we decide if it's the best. And from my experience with the next record, it's going to be a difficult choice. Winter's album cover perfectly explains the tone of its contents. Where the prior 3 albums featured a menagerie of fun, thematically appropriate critters, Winter features a single character floating in the middle of a dark void, all alone. Being the end of the year, Winter provides a time to reflect on the past and fear the future, not providing a lot of time to ponder the present outside of holidays. Making for an extremely polarizing shift, Winter strips back a lot of the presentation previously seen in Summer and Autumn, where the big band and synths are gone and replaced with raw acoustic guitar and grand piano. Philip can't escape his problems forever, and he's going to let it all out in this absolutely monster of an emotional roller coaster. Let's get started.
Dear God, maybe my letters haven't reached you. Did you change addresses recently? Did I forget the stamp?
Not holding back any punches, Winter starts off with Dear God, a series of imaginary letters Philip wrote to God in which he asked for some help. I'm agnostic, so take my interpretation with a grain of salt, but this is what I generally get from the song. Starting out with nothing but an acoustic guitar, it sounds like nothing we've grown used to aside from Something to Believe, and it instantly makes you realize that this is a far more serious album than the prior 3. Right away, he hits you with some powerful lyrics.
Dear God, maybe my letters haven't reached you. Did you change addresses recently? Did I forget the stamp?
Clearly, this isn't the first time he's asked for something and received nothing in return. We quickly learn that his constant requests are prayers for a specific person in his life who has cancer, and he's hoping that if he writes enough, he could save them. He's reached out several times and obviously had no response, and while he doesn't want to look desperate, he has to be to have written this many times. He has nowhere else to turn. After the first chorus, we see him start to go through the stages of grief. After denying that the lack of response isn't normal, he says that the cancer was God's whole plan after all and tells him that he can go to hell. Afterwards, however, he apologizes and begins to bargain as he asks if the issue is that he didn't put on enough stamps. He then reveals that the song lyrics are letters over a long period of time, as he admits that the person in question has now succumbed to their cancer and isn't with him anymore. He says that God could have saved her, but that he was too busy with everyone else, or he simply wasn't in the mood. After this, Philip stops talking to God for a while as he grapples with the loss of this person, but eventually writes him another letter. He's gotten better at staying calm and controlling his anger, and has started taking more time to himself instead of asking for help. He's moved past his grief and is ready to continue his life without blaming anyone for the loss of his friend. It's a super powerful song which takes out any of the fun and whimsy remaining from Autumn right out of you and prepares you for what the rest of this album will present. And boy howdy, you will need to be prepared.
The other night there was an earthquake. I ran outside in my boxers with my laptop and my passport in my hand.
This song was written after an earthquake hit Philip's apartment. I wonder how the other 80 people living there reacted to that. And he thought for a moment that it was the end. It also compares an earthquake to the shock and world-shifting occasion that is a breakup, and how both can scare you and change you as a person. Opening up with the same acoustic guitar as before, even in the same key, you may think that the whole album will be just like this, just Philip and a guitar, but you'll see. After moving to LA, you'd think that Philip would be prepared for something like this, but once he's awoken by his apartment shaking, he quickly escapes with nothing but his laptop and passport. After this incident, he keeps fearing that he'll wake up again to his home crumbling to the ground, but nothing ever happens. That night made him realize how fragile our human bodies really are, and that we really are just living on a rock floating in the middle of space.
Aftershocks. I forget sometimes I'm just living on a rock. I take walks, but we're never really over. There's a chasm in the clock.
One thing like that can shake up your whole perspective on life in an instant, and that's pretty scary. After this, the instrumentation picks up with some backing vocals over a bass guitar and some synthy stuff. Alongside the increased complexity of the musical aspect, the lyrics start to go more in depth as he begins associating the literal aftershocks of an earthquake with those of a heartbreak. You think that your relationship is as stable as the earth, but all of a sudden it can end and you can lose the person you love. After that, you can never fully trust someone not to abandon you like that. While he's moved on from the person, Philip still fears sometimes that it could happen again, like the aftershocks of an earthquake. It's a really clever metaphor, and the song works quite well. However, it's hard to compare to the emotional punch of this next song.
We were driving back from the cabin, drove into some two-story town.
After all the time we've heard of Philip talking about his ex, this song finally describes the beginning of their relationship, as well as him being unwilling to move on. We've seen snippets of how it ended up affecting him, but this is the first time he's been fully honest about her outside of the ruse of an upbeat song. Starting off with an instantaneously depressing piano jig, Philip begins to sing over some beautiful strings as well as the piano. He remembers a time where the two of them snuck into some fairgrounds and had some fun, and this was a purely happy memory of his relationship, unlike some prior songs. He describes his time with her like the Ferris wheel they rode on together, rises to reveal a beautiful view and provides happy memories, but ultimately will return to the surface and conclude, "You can't stay on the ride forever." He goes on to recall the other happy memories they had together, watching junk TV, making bad jokes, and etc. He then continues the song with the single most beautiful chorus I've ever heard.
We were a midnight panic attack, where a beautiful pain lays you flat on your back. But beautiful pain always comes to an end. Goodbye, lover. Goodbye, old friend.
The things he compares his relationship to is heart-wrenching and extremely well done, and the descending strings make it even more powerful. He's remembering all of these things while trying to say goodbye, trying to move on. Part of him doesn't want to leave, regardless of all the bad things this person did to him, as, with most things, there were positive aspects as well. He wants to believe that any day now his phone will ring and the two of them will get back together, but he remembers that in those final days he felt like he was sleeping with a ghost of someone he once knew. The whole song is him remembering the person he fell in love with and moving on from the person they became. And while a part of him will always miss the former, the latter individual has caused him so much stress and pain that he just wants to forget and move on. Ultimately though, he realizes that it's over, and that it will eventually get better, as he says in the final verse.
Soon will be figments and pictures we took, the voicemails you left me, the unreturned books, and even the missing you will fade in the end.
He remembers the figments in the form of the songs he's written. We've been seeing all of his memories play out over the course of the past 3 albums, but now we're slowly moving past the period of reflection and into him starting to move on. But we aren't at the end of the album just yet.
Goodbye, old friend.
Happy Hanukkah, or Will We Still Be Friends, sees Philip singing about a childhood friend he had back in the day, and how they imagined that they'd stay together forever. I think everyone had a person in their lives who, for a while anyway, was their single best friend. Someone who they just clicked with and called every day to see if they could hang out, or just stay on the phone for hours on end. But as you grow up, you realize that they aren't quite right for you anymore, or you just start to fall out of contact. In Philip's case, he starts by telling us that this friend was someone he met in his high school's musical theater program back when he lived in Florida, and that they were a few years younger than him. He recalls how the two of them got together during the balmy Floridian winters in full holiday attire to spend time together, going to bars and driving around to Christmas songs playing on the radio. While Christmas music is playing, the two are both Jewish, thus the chorus.
Happy Hanukkah. What did they get you this year? What will we become when we can get out of here? You'll go to New York and I'll go to LA. I'll be in the movies, you'll write all the plays. And will we still be friends till the end?
Both have high expectations of what their lives will bring, both wanting to be famous figures in the arts. But they worry that if their dreams do come true, that they won't stay connected. New York is pretty far away from LA, and they're unsure about their continued friendship. When you're younger, you always dream about growing up and achieving all your goals, but sometimes you imagine that your childhood friends will be there with you. Like a first grader making plans to live in a mansion with their 2 best friends. It's a nice thought, but fairly unreasonable. The bridge shows Philip realizing that this mantra he's been repeating each chorus means that they might not stay friends anymore.
Time, wonderful time. We used to wish it would pass us right by.
You never realize how good childhood is until you stop wishing that you were an adult and finally have the responsibilities of being one. You wish that you could own your own home as a kid, but when you're all grown up, all you want to do is return to the bliss of being a kid again. Ultimately, it's revealed that the two friends parted ways and moved to the cities of their dreams, and while Philip says that they're still his best friend, the gloomy tone of the final chorus makes it appear like that is only in his mind. He misses them and still considers them his best friend, but they're so far apart that it's hard to believe it could be the same as when they were kids.
Where is she? She's not here. Halfway light, pillow tear.
I wish that I could say that this was the greatest album of all time, because I really do like it, but it's a little hard to do that when this song has this specific rhyme.
Had the dream, what'd she say? Fictional or memory?
It's such an awful slant rhyme and it doesn't work at all. Definitely leaves you with a bad taste in your mouth for the remainder of the song. Speaking of the rest of the song, it's fine. I have no fucking idea what this one's about, I'm gonna be so honest. Part of me feels like it's about how when he falls asleep, he feels like he wakes up born anew, briefly forgetting about his troubles. But it could also be about someone who died because of this lyric.
There's the rub. Are you gone? Do you dream from beyond? We could meet if you do, but I doubt true.
Philip, please tell me what this song is about. This is some next level obscure lyrics and I just don't know. The song is fairly catchy and it's nice, but damn, I have no ideas as to the meaning. Unlike the last song, Philip actually has a pretty simple explanation for what this song is about, which you can't really get straight from the title.
This song is about three-ways.
Whoa, I'd never have guessed! He recounts a time where he and two other people got together and, got a little freaky. Before this though, the three of them went out. The three people in question are Philip, assumedly his ex, and her ex who was abusive. How did the three of them get into this situation? I have absolutely no clue.
Salt's in the food, his words are mixed into the wine.
He clearly makes it uncomfortable for the other two, but they continue anyway. But after this brief ceasefire between it all, Philip is left alone once again. It's really hard to determine the true narrative from this song, as the lyrics are pretty obscure, but maybe someone who's better at musical analysis just needs to give it a go. This whole video is just me trying to get you to listen to Philip's work after all, and if you've made it this far, I think I've done my job. I will keep trying my best on the remaining songs though. These songs are pretty sad, but nothing has really gotten to me yet. This song covers Philip's experiences with homesickness and how moving out of his home to LA has affected him. He doesn't even remember huge events from his childhood, just small snippets of everyday life. His mom watching a movie on the couch, his father sleeping next to her, and his sister sneaking out of the house to hang out with her friends. These are all pretty random things to remember, but when you're remembering your childhood, it's not always the big things that are important. Like from Happy Hanukkah, when you're a kid, you're free to just be with no responsibilities. He's recalling times in his life where he had no worries. He was just a kid seeing the people around him enjoying their own free time.
I'm in the kitchen, watching it happen. Somehow it feels like my job to remember all of us here together doing all right for a moment in time.
We see from this lyric that it wasn't always peaceful as the time he's remembering, and that he feels like he has to be able to recall the good times they all had together, as now that's a difficult thing to come by. Between them being separated by COVID and the children of the house moving out, it's hard to get everyone back together like they once were when they all lived under the same roof. He wishes that he could go back to those times, to simply be held by his mother while she comforts him that they're all there for him, and that they'll never leave. After he moved out, everything was different. As he says in the chorus, none of the familiar patterns and routines he grew used to were present. He had to carve his own path for his new life. Never again will he be able to wake up to a homemade meal from his parents on the regular, and all those things he took for granted while he had them. It's an extremely touching song, and as someone going to college pretty soon, a song that I think will be equally relatable in due time. I'm pretty scared about leaving, but I'm also excited to be out on my own. Though I'll never forget what my childhood was like, there will always be a part of me that will miss it and wish that I could go home.
You're a tin man, a machine, with an iPhone in the place your heart should be.
Believe it or not, this song compares Philip's relationship with some characters as well as the whole setting from The Wizard of Oz. Calling himself a scarecrow, he says that he was made to scare away any potentially good partners, but ultimately runs away himself whenever the opportunity presents. The person he ended up with is called the Tin Man, where instead of a heart, there's a phone that she's become obsessed with instead of actually using a heart to love. He then goes on to say something pretty interesting.
Pay no attention to the man behind the curtain, keeping our relationship in place. Don't look too close, 'cause underneath the makeup, these tears are melting me away.
This suggests that Philip really wants the relationship to work, so he allows himself to be manipulated so that it can continue. Therefore, he presents himself as the wizard, who underneath the costume is really just a man. In this case though, behind the curtain is someone who's been hurt multiple times, and may not be able to remain in the situation much longer. When the person he tries to love acts like a lion tearing him apart, it's pretty hard to want to stay despite your best wishes. In the chorus, he compares his ex to a tornado which promised a perfect life, but it was far too good to be true and only led to his life feeling like he was inside an actual tornado. Thus the final line, "There's no such land as Oz. It's too good to be true." The final duet of the Seasons project, Weak as a Willow, once again shows both sides of Philip's old relationship as they both work to move on from what they've lost. At this point, both have struggled over a long period of time to recover from the breakup, and are nearly at a point where they can finally live life normally again.
I am almost all better. I don't sit by the phone. I don't count on a burner account all your smiles while I'm sitting alone.
In comparison to how we saw him during songs like Anticipation and Redo, all the hope has been taken out of him. His lyrics here are the rawest they've ever been, revealing the lengths he's gone in an attempt to get back to what it was like before he was with her. She isn't taking it great either, as she says she's nearly a person again, as opposed to the walking pile of grief she imagined herself being immediately after they broke up. The two of them then continue to sing together about how they felt recovering from each other, saying that they felt like they moved a mountain and drowned in their own tears. The title of the song comes up when they have to tell each other to stay out of their lives or ask to rejoin, as they're at an extremely fragile point in their healing process. They feel as though they are weak as a willow, and that if either of them asked the other to return to them, they would cave in and do so immediately. They've worked so hard to get out of the other's life, allowing them to keep the friends that they've made because of them, the restaurants they went to, and just cutting them out completely, not because they hate them, but because of the fact that they couldn't bear to see them again without relapsing. They both fully understand how problematic they were for each other, but on the other hand, they will always miss what they had together, regardless of how much pain it brought. We've seen the good and the bad of it from Philip's songs, and this is approaching the end of the project, and we have yet to see a resolution. 2 songs left. Let's see what happens. In many ways, winter is the polar opposite of spring, both in terms of the atmosphere of the albums, the subject matter, and even the instrumentation. But another way they're opposites is how there's actually a lot of duality between the two records lyrically. The second song on Spring is called Springtime, and now the second to last song on Winter is called Wintertime. Where Springtime is about joy and feeling happy, now that it's the spring, Wintertime is quite the contrary. Opening with a last moment of reflection, Philip recalls how his ex once gave him some flowers after a show of his. At the moment, he thought this was a nice thing to do, but in hindsight, it was merely a gesture to disguise her true motives. Back to the present, we see Philip writing the songs we're listening to now as he draws from all of these memories to make each lyric. You know what they say about dating writers.
It's white, it's graphite on white. I handle my pencil and think of your bite. I scribble my lyrics and worry all night. I'll never be so loved again in my life.
He wants to create these songs as a way of coping with the breakup, but in doing so, he brings himself back to the memories of the pain he's lived through, both mentally and through heartache. In the bridge, he finds himself wondering if this is what his life will be now. Him, weak as a willow, just getting by using songwriting as an outlet for his pain, and dying to return to such a terrible situation. Then, he takes a moment to look outside of his issues, and sees the world. It's wintertime. The ground is white with snow, the lake is iced over, and children are playing, leaving tracks behind them. He tells himself to go to sleep and that everything is going to be fine, but so many different things require his attention now. He's a small celebrity after his fame from TikTok and a TV show called Earth, and he watches the numbers of views fluctuate between each upload. He remembers more times they spent together and wishes that she could have been the person he anticipated her being in his head. He keeps trying to focus on the snow and the cold of winter, anything but this, but even though he keeps telling himself everything will be fine, it's hard to accept. This leads into a chaotic bombardment of springs as he panics, telling himself that if he lets the snow cover up all his problems, everything will be okay. And then, we return to the final verse.
It's blues, it's whites and it's blues. I made 4 records to get over you. When I look back at the colors I used, did I get better or dig at the bruise?
He spent the past year writing songs about this person, and for the first time, he wonders if doing so helped in the healing process or simply gave him more reminders of what he no longer has. Maybe all this writing has made the wound bigger, and this emptiness he feels is going to last forever. He asks himself one last time if this is his life now, if all this writing has led to this, but he finally accepts that this person doesn't define him, that he has the ability to move on from her, and he does all this with one final word. At the start of this project, 5 words resonated which told us all what Philip's state of mind was. He'd never be sad again. But over the past year, he's been drawn deeper and deeper into his depression due to the increasingly personal subject matter of the songs. What was once a feel-good collection of songs talking about aliens, genies, and cafes has become a serious reflection of Philip's life. Then he thought he'd never grow up and always be as happy as he was then, but looking back on those earlier songs is hard for him.
Now I read my lyrics and feel foolish. I've got room for everything inside. So when you say I don't think I can do this, I've exercised and said my prayers, but still the pain's too much to bear. This time it's not gonna be alright.
This is when it is revealed that he is not the one who says that he'll never be happy again, but his ex-lover. After he left, she said that she'd never be happy again, and those words clearly stuck with him. While he's accepted that the happy days are still possible in the prior song, she still feels awful about him leaving her, in his eyes. The song is all about what she said to him, saying that the fact that he doesn't think he'll be sad again is toxic positivity in her eyes, and that she'd rather stay on her phone than see the world outside. But as we've just seen, sometimes stepping outside for a moment is extremely helpful for healing. Philip imagines this possibility and brings the album full circle by repeating the bridge from Spring's opening song.
Don't give up the fight. Every feeling has a season. I'm not alright, but I'm gonna be.
This line, which was once written in the perspective of Philip, is now being conveyed from him telling her this information. He's learned from the past year, and since he still somewhat cares about her, he wants to help her as well. He tells her exactly what he's discovered in the final verse.
You don't have to ever feel all better. Certain songs may never fade away. But let my love be your favorite sweater. It took a year to finally know. Pain will come and pain will go, but stick around and it'll be okay.
After all the pain, after all the manipulation, and after all the sadness and doubt and grief, he still cares enough to tell her the lesson he learned. He tells her that she will be happy again, despite everything that happened. He was able to move on, and so will she. That's the note the album ends on, telling her that sadness isn't permanent. These 4 records have been all about Philip grappling with his breakup, and now he's passing that on to her. It's a wonderful way to end such a powerful journey, and makes for a perfect conclusion for the album and the project. Being a much more melancholic album than the prior 3, Winter has the disadvantage of having a much quieter sound than what we've heard previous to this. However, Philip's eclectic songwriting ability works wonders, and Winter makes for an incredibly personal and emotional album from start to finish. In all honesty, I've cried listening to a few of these songs, and while it's a little hit or miss with songs like Every Morning I'm Born and 3 Ways, what those songs lack, the others make up for tenfold. Goodbye Lover, Happy Hanukkah, I Wanna Go Home, and Wintertime are emotional powerhouses that make it hard to listen to without getting a little teary-eyed. Philip's inclusion of strings is perfect, and the instrumentation in the whole album is extremely powerful. It's definitely an 8.5 to maybe even a 9 out of 10 for me, just narrowly surpassing Autumn as my favorite album from the project. And now that that's done, and I've reviewed all 4 albums extensively and explaining the stories of each song, you may have one question left on your mind. Why the hell did I make this video? Most people who clicked on this video have most likely not heard of Philip Labes, or at the bare minimum has heard a TV show called Earth. Philip only has 64,000 monthly listeners on Spotify, which to be fair is an awful lot, but imagine how many of those people only came for the song in question. His YouTube channel only has about 10,000 subscribers, and while his TikTok has over 300,000 subscribers, most of his videos only get a few thousand views. Back on the YouTube scene, most of his videos also only have a few thousand views and even under 1,000 on some. Even on Spotify, aside from a few hits from the released singles, a lot of the season's albums aren't listened to that much. Spring is the most popular, with most of its songs having over 100,000 plays due to the shot of popularity from TV show, and some of the others being successful singles before the release of the project. Summer, however, exclusively has songs under 100,000 plays, aside from In My Apartment, although Something to Believe may reach 100K by the time this video comes out. In fact, Philip just released his new album, Sorry State, and it's actually performing a lot better than some of the songs from Autumn and Winter. Hell, the eponymous track Autumn only got 1 listen 1 month. 1! You should go listen to Sorry State after this video, by the way, but that's not the point right now. In most manners of speaking, these albums are not popular. If you want to get a popular video on YouTube, you should talk about things people care about or have heard of before. So why am I not doing that? Why have I put so much energy into making a video about an artist most people haven't heard of before? By the time this video comes out, I'll have been on YouTube for 10 years. My last channel had less than 50 subscribers for about 5 years, until a random video I made one day blew up. It got over 17 million views and my subscriber count began to blow up as well. I was happy because I had made something popular, but I quickly realized that my newfound fanbase didn't care about anything else I made. So 2 years later, I privated the video, quit, and made a brand new YouTube channel. After 4 years there, I've made a small but wonderful following. I put a lot more effort into my newer videos, but nothing I've ever made will ever surpass that old video of mine. Point is, I've tried to get online popularity before, and I understand how difficult it is. So that's why I feel so lucky that I discovered Philip's music. In the summer of 2023, I had started as a camp counselor, and I was really stressed out. One night shortly after I started, I walked out to the edge of a nearby lake and sat down. I needed some music to help calm my nerves, so I shuffled a playlist Spotify made for me. That's when I first heard the opening lyrics to a TV show called Earth. In that moment, I was taken away from all of my problems and was fully engrossed in the song. After that, I checked out his profile and then listened to all of Spring in one sitting. It was a magical experience, so I reached out to some of my friends to ask if they'd heard of him, and the resounding answer was no. To this day, I've never met anyone who has heard of Philip outside of TV show, and it is an absolute crime. But it helped me to realize something. There must be tens of thousands of people as talented as Philip trying to make a name for themselves, but being lost in the deep waters of the internet. Everyone wants to be seen and to be heard, and they never want to give up on their dreams despite the advice they've been given. But in the online scene, it's so hard to do so. I was lucky enough to find Philip's work in that moment. And if you've made it this far into the video, I think I've convinced you that you should listen to him too. But the idea that so many others could be even less well known for their stuff is so frightening. They just want people to hear their work, but it's so hard to get your stuff out there. But there is a chance that someone's listening. Maybe Philip's right and there really are aliens out there watching over everyone's lives. Boring, rich, exciting, bland, middle class, short-lived, and all other types. That means that there is at least something out there who wants to watch your story and find out what you end up doing. What do you want them to see? Thank you for watching the video. I hope you enjoyed, and I hope you learned a few things and maybe are going to listen to Philip Labes after this. Now, I have one more thing to do, and it's something interesting. People in my Discord, completely without me saying anything, they did this all on their own, named all of the critters on all of the album covers, so along with some fan art that they made, I am going to say all of them. Phalanges, Apple, Horngus, Fluffnut, Clarpit, Bebo, Weirtwink, Big Sal, Tommy Mosstop, Autism Diagnosis, Swiss Alps, Wimple, Fridiba, Sieber, Schmorng, Pepsi Cola, Ferumph, Sprigoni, Barber Ball, Squimble, Peebo, Bingus, Gooble Wooble, Humphrey, Weed, Logan, Broink, Schlungus, Pineapple, Schmuck or Gub Gub, Spike, Sploingus Blueble, Mitch, Rodney Rumpus, Fergal, Tyrone Blowable, Longboy Flop, Sperkley, Dave, Schlorngus, Leorb, Bongus, Cheegs, Zool Kubin, Emo, Spurgle, Kabowie, Jom, Bobbert, Jom the Second, Jom's cousin, Startin, Le Superboy, Leafer, Sweet Tooth, Sieber the Second, Blumpkim, Carrot, Walk, Sammy Joe, Frank, Finkerbinson, Gerbil the Pale Floating Man, Footungus, Vibin Willocks, Mighty Tail, Amoeba, Wingless Wade, Silentia Ruffled Cap, Flarp, Stickbert, Flump, The Skrunklies, Vip Tingle Worcestershire and Liam, Filipino Benfiz, the fourth in line to the crown of Humperdoank, otherwise known as Crumb, Joanne Casserole the 27th, Berto, Broby, Large Intestine, Todd, and Aster. Well, that's something.